We also remember our young men who have fallen while serving our country. And we weep with those who loved them. Young heroes who swore an oath when they said, "We shall rise, we shall fall. At your command, this for you, South Africa." Be proud of yourselves as we are of you. And may your nights be peaceful, always. And when at times you are cold and weary, may the warm thought of our love accompany you through these times, knowing our prayers are for your safety always, and longing to welcome you back home. May the discomforts you have suffered for our sake be replaced with happiness and blessings on your return. May the lonely times be replaced with an abundance of love from us all, white, black, colored, and Asian. I, like many others, don't have much to give in return, but this is our way of saying thank you, and may God bless and protect you all, brave soldiers of South Africa. These thoughts, wishes, and prayers are dedicated to all our soldiers, every one of them in uniform. Brave young men, we salute you.
Almost 600,000 young South African white males were called up for compulsory military service. We all took part in the so-called border war. This little line of graves here is very symbolic of that war, hidden behind the wall, almost forgotten, like our story. My name is FPS Senekal.
Of Namibia. This magnificent North Korean built monument was erected in honor of our former foes, SWAPO, and their military wing, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, PLAN. Even though very few of us had met each other before this expedition, all of these pilgrims have one thing in common. A long time ago, we were soldiers in the SADF, the South African Defence Force. On the 4th of August 1967, military conscription became compulsory for all white males in South Africa.
Shortly after you turn 16, you get your call-up papers.
I was 16 years old, and then I came to school.
I got them just like everyone else got theirs, eh? And with great excitement, I wanted to go to the army. Eh? I knew zip about the army. Before I went, I did cadets at school.
We were called up for 9 months. But because we went to the parachute battalion, we had to do another extra month.
Yeah, I got my call up in 1978, to force our Middelburg. Never knew how to fire a rifle or what to expect. So it was quite an interesting adventure.
We had tactical wars, the First World War, the Second World War. And when the Second World War ended, we had the nuclear situation developing. And in the period following the Second World War, we had the start of what we call the Cold War.
And warfare, especially in the international sphere, changed completely after 1945. And if one doesn't see all the things after 45 against the background of the new type of warfare, you'll never understand what actually happened.
The bigger powers, the United States, the USSR, could not really afford to start a war because of the fear that this might develop into a nuclear clash. The smaller wars, for example the liberation wars, hooked on to the bigger clash, and they sided with one of the big powers in order to get the instruments of war.
It was part of the global Cold War era. In other words, hot war in the Cold War era in Southern Africa. It was a completely international affair.
The liberation wars in Africa and also in Southwest Africa, now Namibia, hooked on to more the eastern side, thereby siding with international communism, and not really knowing what the real dangers of international communism would be. On the other hand, the Western forces started to counter this by aiding smaller wars with war equipment and so on, in order to prevent the bad part of communism, of international communism, which we saw in the USSR, spreading to areas such as Southern Africa.
South Africa's position vis-à-vis Namibia was this, that it was previously a German colony, and then it became a mandate as authorized by the League of Nations. The League of Nations was the forerunner of the United Nations. Namibia was in fact a Class C mandate. A Class C mandate was that category of territories which the League of Nations were of the opinion could never become a real independent state and governed by itself. And South Africa had the mandate from the League of Nations to administer the territory of what is now Namibia.
The Africa Uhuru, or the free making of Africa, started around about in 1960. And in that specific year, I was on the staff course at the military college, and we had to write a paper on how do we think the South African Defence Force should train and equip themselves for dealing with protecting South Africa. And that was the first real study that we made of this on the background of the kind of war which we were experiencing at that stage. We were also at that stage as a defense force, connected to some force that we were supposed to keep ready for Suez, the Suez Canal. But it was very clear to us soon that our direction would be counter-insurgency war.
As the pilgrims embark on their quest into their past and into Angola, we pass through Wamboland. Wamboland lies in the northern part of Namibia. After 2 decades, traces of the border war still remain. It was here in northwestern of Wamboland that the first shots of the war were fired in 1966. At that stage, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia was initiating a classic insurgency and intimidation effort in order to wrest control of Namibia by force.
In order to subject the Southwest Africa people to the ideology of SWAPO, it was necessary to become powerful. And to become powerful, they had to develop a military machine, and they had to counter South Africa. They could never counter us head on. So this is a typical liberation war, which is an insurgency war. 20% military and 80%, you can call it political, psychological, propaganda war.
In the 1960s, security was a police responsibility.
You know, the border war was a 23-year-long war. It started in 1966 with a insurgency which ended up at Ngulumbosh when they settled in a little camp there. SWAPO settled in a little camp, and they were taken out by policemen, by army people.
The police were not trained as infantry and had little experience in counterinsurgency operations. Before the attack on Ngulumbashi, a small group of soldiers from one parachute battalion were hastily attested as policemen to form part of the helicopter-borne attack force.
Commandant Jan Breitenbach, I think, led that one, and the Air Force was involved in that one with gunships, Alouette gunships, and support for Dakotas, you know, logistic support and so on. So I can say that right from day one of the Bush War, the Air Force was involved.
2 guerrillas were killed and 9 captured. Operation Blue Wildebeest forced SWAPO to move their operations out of Wamboland and into the Caprivi Strip.
We were given the task to protect the people of Southwest Africa against the kind of attacks on the headman and the traditional leader, cadre of the then Southwest Africa situation.
I believe the reason why we were really effective was because of an excellent system, not only in the military, but before the military. You know, we had school cadets where every single white male kid, right up to matric, had to be part of the drill platoon, had to be part of preparation and planning. You know, even the school teachers were sent to the infantry school at Oudtshoorn to be taught as leaders so that they could prepare the young pupils for what lay ahead. Then we did a whole year of training. If you remember correctly, we did basic training for 3 months. And after 3 months, I would send a troop only to one place for 1 weekend. That was back to his mother to show that he could now make a bed. And then we got him back and we gave him 3 more months of training. Muster him as either a rifleman or a driver or a gunner or whatever. And then 3 months of further training on section and platoon level, and eventually 3 months, the last 3 months of that first year, training on sub-unit, which is company level and unit level. But I can promise you, at the end of that first year, you could fight through a brick wall with those troops. They were absolutely brilliant because the team had been grouped and trained and were prepared.
I was with the first army company who landed at Papacha in 1966. I was a platoon sergeant in one parachute battalion. And there we start to show the army presence in the Caprivi. I was a foot infantryman along the whole border up till 1973. But that was absolutely a counter-insurgent situation, because at that stage the Portuguese were still in charge of Angola. So the Caprivi was actually the area where they come through.
At that time, Angola, Mozambique and some others were what the Portuguese called overseas provinces of Portugal. But now metropolitan Portugal had a new government. And the Soviets were first to get into the act. And they soon had control of places like Angola and Mozambique.
It was in 1974 that the first South African soldier got killed in the contact. He was Lieutenant Fred Zili, and it wasn't known at the time, but he was a member of the Elite Reconnaissance Commando, the Rekkies.
Special forces, like all special forces in many countries, are selected volunteers that want to go the mile further.
A reconnaissance soldier is a specially selected individual who are highly trained in various skills and arts in order to conduct operations deep behind enemy lines. I just want to say something. A recce soldier is not somebody that eats cats and dogs and have to kill your grandmother and so on. That is not true. We are just highly trained individuals to operate behind enemy lines.
People were put through 5 weeks of very, very, very difficult and very gruesome selection phases, where they sometimes walked over 500 kilometers in the duration of the course. They were treated very badly. We didn't feed them very well, and they never knew what's going to happen next, which is what one of the, apparently according to the psychological people, they say that the fear of the unknown is much worse than the fear of death. And we kept them always not knowing what's going to happen the next day. And many times people, maybe wrongly, were taken off selection due to the fact that they, in the last couple of kilometers before the end of the selection course, they gave up. They were very good soldiers, but unfortunately they didn't make it to the last meter, and that's what that counts about. You must make it to the last meter.
1974 was also the year in which the Portuguese dictator Marcelo Caetano was overthrown by his own disgruntled military. They had been fighting a protracted war against liberation movements in the colonies. In Angola, there were 3 liberation movements: the FNLA, the MPLA and UNITA.
There was really no connection between Southwest Africa or Namibia operations and the assistance to the liberation movements of Angola.
The MPLA had assistance and active participation from the Soviet Union. The FNLA had lukewarm assistance from the United States, and later on Savimbi also had some support from the United States.
The MPLA started to expand in the areas, into the other areas. A situation started with the other groups being mainly trained as guerrilla operators, to be able to know something more about warfare so that they could also have an interest in their own areas in a way that they will be able to force the MPLA to form a government of national unity. So the whole political idea in Angola was the formation of a government of national unity, after which they were going to work out exactly the constitutional situation of Angola after the departure of the Portuguese people.
With some instigation and promises from the United States, South Africa became involved in the struggle in Angola when war broke out between the MPLA and the other 2 parties, assisted by the Soviets, and the Soviets had Cubans there on the ground in a military capacity before anybody else and anything else.
The whole development then was that we were invited, we were requested to give some assistance.
My very first operation took place in Operation Savannah. In short, what happened there in 1975, 7 of us from 1 Recce commando in Durban was ordered to join Colonel Jan Breitenbach at Rundu. We went there and he told us about Operation Savannah, and then we infiltrated Angola by vehicle one night to a small base called Mapupa, and there we started training approximately 400 FNLA soldiers.
So this development started with 2 training bases, one for the FNA and one for UNITA. And we then took these groups of guerrilla fighters and we started training them a little bit more in sophisticated warfare.
After a few weeks of training, I would say about 3.5 months, 3 months, Colonel Breitenbach was satisfied that the standards were good enough to commence with the operation.
That's when Savannah started. Savannah was the operation in order to free the traditional UNITA and traditional FNA areas.
We started with our infiltration in the northern direction towards Luanda, and on the way there we had various fights with the enemy, and as we got closer to Luanda, Lobito, Benguela, Lubongo, we started encountering the Cubans, which was not really a big problem for us. Most of the times they ran away, but they were definitely better trained than the rest.
Several task forces operated deep into Angola. Then the United States pulled the plug and South Africa had to withdraw.
To fight on the side of one of those parties, or giving one of those parties involved in Angola assistance, and being also assisted by the United States is one thing, but for South Africa to do it all by itself is quite a different matter. So South Africa withdrew.
4 November 1975, myself and a very big friend of mine, Sergeant Fingers Kruger, we were both sergeants. We got wounded at a place called Kibal. In the beginning, Colonel Jan Breitenbach was very cross because we were getting wounded. However, we were evacuated, and that was the end for me and for Fingers on Operation Savannah.
Savannah was a steep learning curve for the South Africans, and soon new weapon systems were being developed.
The force in Operation Savannah started off with Bedford, Bubble Nose, as we used to call it. Started off with .303 Vickers machine guns. Started off with old first generation anti-tank missiles and so forth. So I think it's putting it mildly if you say that we were poorly equipped. I may also add that we were rather poorly trained at that time. The revival of our training processes actually only started after Operation Savannah, and of course the big drive to develop new equipment, which eventually saw the Artel, the G5 and various other pieces of equipment that were used by 1988.
There was no real connection between our strategy against SWAPO and our strategy to assist UNITA and FNLA. But eventually we did benefit from this because by being present in southern Angola, we found that it was much easier to maintain a barrier between Angola and Southwest Africa, thereby making it more difficult for the SWAPO people to infiltrate, because some bases existed in Zambia and some bases existed in Angola.
One specific one I can remember, it is a type of operation that you'll never forget, and those that took part in it.
No, it was the very first and very start of Special Forces, and it was we were looking for something to do after all the training that we've done, and then a guy called Koen Vlietstra came up with a possible enemy base in southwest western Zambia.
We prepared for an operation, and I was in a small team that did deep reconnaissance, and then we had a backup team that would come in as a mini assault force.
Training started in Fordoppies area. We did some parachute training, night training, regrouping training, freefall training. We also did a lot of training, navigational exercises, shooting, attack on base camps, emergency procedures, medical retraining, and so on.
We were tasked to find the base and then to attack the base after we confirmed that there was presence of an enemy doing training.
It was then presented to the generals, and I think it went up fairly high to the politicians to okay it.
I can't remember the name of the operation. I think it was called Opskari, because all these military operations have got some funny names, and I don't know who think it out, but in any case.
We then moved to Rundu, and the reason why we moved to Rundu is the South African government didn't want to admit that they did do an operation into Zambia, and if we had taken off from Katima Malelu or Mapacha, it would have been very obvious that it was us doing the operation, because everybody knew us in that area.
Okay, then the operation went in, we exited, it was across a river, it was a moonlight night.
The plane gradually climbed up to a height of about 16 to 17,000 feet, and then feathered back the engines and cut down the power so the noise would be much less, and then virtually glided down to about 14,000 feet over the drop zone.
And it was quite a scary feeling when the ramp of that C-130 opened at altitude, and the noise of the slipstream rush in, and then you swallow a few bumps down here because you are damn scared. And but the comfort of having 4 buddies with you, and I think if they put some contraption on our hearts, we could have started a big generator with that.
We dropped out, the 5 of us together. We formed a 5-man star, held on to each other. And the reason for that was you can be separated by a long distance if you don't stick together.
It was a moonlight night. We could see the drop zone clearly as we entered.
And then on about 5,000 feet, we broke the star, and from the most junior person to the most senior person, we pulled our parachutes.
And then we staggered the deployment of canopies. We jumped with a round canopy at that time called a Russian PC. It was modeled on the Soviet UT-15 canopy that was used for accuracy in many of the world championships previously.
So me being the reconnaissance team commander, were right at the bottom. Everybody could look down and see my parachute. It was about 1 to 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning.
We had a good landing.
And we landed within about 25 meters from each other, which was remarkable for an operation from a height like that.
We cached our parachutes, found a place to lie up. The drill was you wait on the DZ and just for an hour you remain silent.
At that stage there were no GPSs or navigational aids other than a compass, and we counted the yards that we walked, and we also continuously took compass bearings.
We went into the area where we thought, because Charles did the navigation, Charles Nodia, he was the team leader, and as we approached the area we couldn't hear any sound.
And at one stage I said to Koos Moorcroft, who was the second in command of the team, we should be very close to the bases. Now let's base up here and wait until the sun comes up, and then we'll see where we are and what's going on.
We found a thick bush. We went around in all around the fence and spent the night hardly sleeping but quiet.
And very shortly after we bedded down, I heard a rooster crowing. And then suddenly, on the opposite direction, another one, and we were then realized that we were right between the two bases that we were looking for. I jumped up in my sleeping bag, and so did Koos, and we were staring at each other, and then we knew it was too late.
We were next to the parade ground where this camp members were doing PT and preparing for the day's training. So we were in the base already.
And also they started doing physical training for the morning, which was quite an eye-opener. We were led to believe that there were 35 in the base, and then we realized that there were much more than that. My first coded message that I sent back in Morse code was that, can you change I said we landed safely, we're very close to the bases, you can change the amount of people in the base from 35 to 350. I think they missed the zero.
For the whole of that day we sat again motionless and scared as hell, because at any minute they could find or detect our presence there, but fortunately they couldn't find us.
We were extremely scared and worried about it. Being special forces, we don't get scared. We were a little bit nervous.
And as it got dark, then Charles and myself went with the rest of the group, but Charles and myself went then on our own. We left the group because it's 5 is too big, so the two of us went into the base.
My mission was to determine the location of the officer commanding of the base camp, all the machine gun positions, mortar positions if possible.
They were not expecting anybody because they were singing, sitting around fires, so it made it easy for us to move around and find out what we need to know.
I turned around and I said to Koos, I whispered in his ear and I said, I don't think this is going to work. I think we must leave. We're going to be compromised and found. He said, I've never agreed with you more than about this at this stage. So we started crawling out of the base.
We got all the information we required of two bases, the Chitotwa A and Chitotwa B, and then we left, and now we had to go back and lie up again, because the next night the group that will do the attack will fly in, and then we will lead them in. So this was a typical special force operation where a small group infiltrate, find the base, and then lead the attacking force in.
I was the number 1 jumper on the starboard side. I can't remember who was the jumper on the port side. I think it was Captain Fenton himself. As we neared the drop zone, and I was standing in the door of the aircraft, it was bright moonlight, and I could see the landings, the drop zone, clearly under us.
Charles and myself and the rest of the group were on a drop zone that we prepared for them with strobe lights.
And I was starting to look for the DZ code light, which Charles was supposed to show the aircraft to identify the drop zone.
As the aircraft came on running, we switched on the strobe lights, and then Charles had a ground-to-air radio, and he spoke to the pilot.
I saw nothing. However, I was sure that it was a drop zone because of the shape and size. And the green light went on, and we immediately jumped out.
But unfortunately, the main force were dropped short. They were dropped a couple of seconds short, and Koos and I were marking the DZ, bringing in the C-130. And when they approached, I couldn't help to say to the pilot, "You are spot on." And then he broke the news that they already dropped the people.
First of all, I looked up to see if my parachute was open, no problems there. And then I was starting to search for the light on the ground. I found nothing. Then I knew something is wrong.
The quickest that Koos and I put torches off and strobe lights off, because here we were standing in the middle of an open area, shining torches, and there was nobody that jumped in.
We switched off lights, hit the deck, and then took a compass bearing of the direction that the aircraft approached us, with the hope of finding the other group.
By hook or by crook, after about 2 or 3 hours, we found each other. And we must remember that those years there was no GPS systems, it was just map and time, and that's what we had.
We cached our equipment, and I camouflaged my equipment because it was at night, and then that night we were meant to attack on first light.
We started walking down to the bases, and then eventually we split in two. I circled around and formed up for my attack on the base, on the first base.
We formed up in an extended line on the outskirts of the base camp, and I could clearly see the camp in front of us, all the grass huts shining in the moonlight. So we prepared ourselves, and I was in command of the mortars, 60mm Patmores, and I deployed them 3 or 4 meters behind the assault troops.
You know, it just struck me that day when we were there, and you know, I was standing on the exact place where we were lying that morning waiting for the time to attack. And I just thought, when I was standing there, how can it possibly be that 7 people would join me in a fight where they know that the odds is about 20 to 1, maybe worse. Yet, when I gave the command to attack, nobody hesitated. They all just threw everything in and started attacking the base.
I could clearly hear the people in the huts coughing. Later on, they started talking as the base started to get alive. At one stage, one of the soldiers, of the enemy soldiers, came out of his building, his sleeping quarters, and he walked straight towards us. And we were about, I would say, 30 meters away from them.
And during the wait, one of the occupants of the base walked out to relieve himself, and he peed all over Elsie Widdendal.
And as he looked down for the first time, then he saw us, and chaos started.
Hannes opened fire on his attack, and then it was free for all, and we started the attack. We did fire and movement. We drew a heavy machine gun fire from the right-hand side. At that stage, Johnny Ackers and I met up in the base, and Johnny Ackers ran straight through that bursts of machine gun fire, went on his knees on the other side, started firing, and then indicated to me that I had to follow him. And I decided I'm not going to be that lucky, and I crawled under the machine gun fire, and then asked Elsie if he could make a plan, and they took the enemy machine gun position out.
After a few minutes, we were through the camp. Everything was burning due to the tracers, the mortar fire.
And it was a very successful attack. We had no casualties, except on our way out, I had 2 of my scouts in front.
Well, that is when we heard a big bang amongst us, right amongst us. We were now walking in a single file, and the guy, he was about 2 or 3 meters in front of me. He stepped on a landmine.
And we thought it was mortar fire, but then we realized that Robinson stepped on a mine, and it took his leg off below the knee. Now we had that situation, and we now it's mines. We don't know where the other mines were, and we had to deal with him and calm him down.
Neil was a big guy. He played rugby for prop for Eastern Province those years. So he's a massive man, and it took 6 operators to carry him out.
We landed back at Fort Doppies, and I had a gut feeling that my kit was not there, because at the night when they arrived, my friend Kanaas Conradi jumped in with the attacking group, and being a good friend, he gave me a letter from my wife Isabel. I ate the letter because I know we were not supposed to be there, so I took the envelope with my name, stuck it in my Bergen or backpack, with the idea when we go out, I would get my bag, take the envelope out. So the letter was gone. I ate it and never even read it. The rubbish hit the fan because we had now to fly. General Magnus Belan, Chief of the Army, wanted to see us. I recall he said, "Gentlemen, we must put all the cards on the table and we must speak the truth." And when that man said, "You speak the truth, you do not bugger around." So he listened to the story, said, "No, it's not too serious about this, we can explain that." Or at the time, I think Minister Botha, he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that was his task. But fortunately for us at that time, Neil's leg is still around there somewhere, but he's, at least he's alive.
And when the information of Smoke Shell came about, it was a very delicate situation for me to handle, because I want to sharpen them to be prepared for this operation. And let me say that our troops was excellent. I still maintain that they were the best troops in the world. But still, you need to sharpen them for a particular op. So it was done under very high security measures. I couldn't inform them of what's happening. However, I did tell them of the training, that we must prepare for war, not exactly where we're going. And this was a build-up over a period of about 10-15 days.
We all knew, I mean, why would they call us up like that and under so quick? Why? What was the reason? So I think each one of us had an inkling that something was going to happen.
Because everything was top secret at the time. We didn't know what we were going to, but it felt like we were going to do something big. You know, that feeling you get that there's going to be ops, but it was very secret.
And one could see how they were getting prepared. And before I announced the operation, I spoke to them all and I said to them, war is tough. If you are not prepared to take up your weapon and to fight for your country, you are welcome to stand down. After that, I really informed them of the detail of the operation, and I again asked them, those that are not prepared, they can stand down.
The Germany spoke to us and said, look, you know, this is going to happen, guys are going to die, and you know, I don't know, you must be strong and God is with you and all this stuff. And if you want to leave, you must seek a report. Still remember that. And it obviously young and everyone wanted to go, I must say. So, and we went. We left on the 8th of June.
We arrived at Inano on the 9th of June. They had our last little canteen thing and all the rest.
And the guys were very anxious. No one slept. Robert, my friend that actually eventually got killed there, he didn't sleep the whole night. He stood guard for all of us because maybe they knew, you know.
And off we went into Angola the next day. It was the 9th of June.
I had the privilege of going with them, and I moved all the way with them towards the base.
It was very difficult terrain, sandy, bushy, no roads.
With the sandy soil, it was possible for the rattle vehicles to move straight through the bush, and thereby preventing us from the dangers of the mines, which all over the roads were put down by the Swapo people.
It was a hell of a convoy. It was apparently 30 kilometers long or something.
Anyway, on the 10th of June, it must have been about Opus 1, we all got given a little
So we got in, and then myself and Martin French, we were like driving and throwing grenades in bunkers. That I remember clearly. And then the rattle stopped, And I remember also another thing, we were sitting there and they were actually, at the time, were already opening up on us. Because they hit the tree. Because Martin French is their marker, they think they're shooting at us. And that's how it started. And they actually hit the tree, that I remember clearly. And we went back inside again. And as we got in, it sort of got intense. You know, you could feel there was something not right. And at the time, Robert and I swapped over. He said, no, Marco, let's change places because I also want to throw grenades. It shows you, you know. So we swapped. And we carried on. And then the next thing, I heard our gunner started shooting rapidly. So there must have been something going on.
And we heard some shooting in the distance, and some, not in the distance, but close by, but to our right. And loud bangs and flipping. So of course you flip, and now this is a real thing, and now it's time to pop yourself. And then we were also in the trenches. The guys that we threw some grenades. And I fired through out the rifle port.
In any case, and then the rattle stopped, and there was this heavy, our gunner, Pip Warren, and started rapidly firing the 20 mil, you know. So there must have been something, and then there was silence. And then I remember 2 rounds coming through the rattle, traces, from the front, came in, past us like that, and I thought, no, this is time to get out of here. But at that specific time changes. I don't know how to describe. Everything goes blurry, and it's like as if time stops. I don't know how to describe it, you know. And then Steve Cronier, the driver, he actually turned around and opened the doors. And I'd already seen, then I realized we'd been hit. Because I saw he was hit in the chest, you know, and then he died. But the doors were, then I still said to Robert, I think we must jump because this cuck is coming now. You know, you could feel that wasn't right. As we jumped out, they hit him. And I think the grenades that from the 23 hit him, and that's how he got killed. I don't want to describe, you know,
and we came to a clearing. And when we got to this clearing, the first thing I saw was a tank burning. And it was like a real wake-up shock. Yes, there's a tank burning. Anyway, we drove a bit closer, and I realized, no, it's not a tank, it's a rattle there.
In any case, we'd landed on the ground, and then I'd realized I'd been hit, because I had burning pain in my hip and in my leg. That's where I got hit the first time. And I said, oh shit, I've been hit. And I could actually feel a burning feeling, sensation. But the worst thing about it is, again, everything is slow motion, and you know, you don't know. And then I shouted Robert, because we were close, you know, always worked together. Robert. And then I saw him lying on the ground, but he was gone. And then from then things got worse, because I couldn't remember things. I stood up and started to shoot, but you just don't know what you're doing. And then Van der Vyver came around the side of the rattle, and I asked him, where's everybody? He says, no, Almal's do it. So then from there, I thought, no, this is no more joke. This is for reals, you know. So all you want is actually just to get out, because the fear takes over. You know, this fear is the worst thing you can have. And we started running, trying to get sort of shelter. You know, that's what you want. You just want to get out. There isn't any more. There's survival. That's what it's about. The next thing, we jumped into a bunker. Saw a bunker, and as we were going in, I thought maybe this is fine. It's safe. But as I looked, because there were L formation bunkers, I looked around the corner and there were 3 toes looking on the other side. And I said, no, this is not a right place to be. So we jumped out and we carried on running again. And I don't know, look, as I said, I don't know which direction we were going, because you're not there anymore. Mentally, you're not there. And the enemy jumped out of this like foxhole, and he took, I think it was 3 shots. But I stood with my legs opened, you know, because I just cracked. I couldn't do nothing, and he actually skinned my knee. Shot me, and then Van der Vyver behind me took him out. But again, you don't feel pain because you're so scared. So we started running, and there was this like anthill that I'll also never forget. And we ran there, me and Van, and they were shooting at us with 14.5 Z2.
And the next thing I saw was Marco Caforia, and I didn't know it was Marco Caforia at the time. It was Marco Caforia and a dude by the name of Van der Vyver running towards our rattle, quite far away.
And then I heard the rattle noises in the distance. And I said to Van, look, this is our chance. Let's get out of here because the rattles are coming now. They said, no. We were like both obviously crying. We're cracked, you know. And I said, no, come, let's go, because this is our way out.
Me, Bloom, and the base screamed for our driver to stop because we wanted to load these oaks on, get them into our rattle. And when they got closer, we saw, hey, it's Van der Vyver and Marco Caforia.
And then we didn't know, but it was our platoon 3. They were coming from another direction.
jumped out the rattle and stood there screaming at them to run.
And we started running, and then they took pot shots again, and while I was running, I got hit with 14,5, shrapnel on my legs.
The next thing, Kuiergat went down.
And a guy, I remember his name was Luke Calvin, platoon 3 guy, opened the door and he stood there and he said, "No, come in, because they knew us, obviously."
I ran to him and helped him get up, screaming at him to get up. I helped him get up. It was about 30 meters away from our rattle.
And I thought, this is our ticket out of here, thank God. So he's feel more relieved, you know. I got in from the right side and Van went in the left side. And as the doors closed, they hit that rattle.
And the next thing, a 14,5 anti-aircraft gun hit us 3 times from directly in front of me, in front of us. The first round went through the door, I'd say about 6 inches away from Kuiergat's face.
They shot that rattle too with 23 mils and it hit me in the face, in the eye, in my arms, and well, my hand here. And from then I thought, no, this is it. Today's not my day. I'm not going to get out of this place.
Our section leader, his name was Stumka, was screaming at Vermaak, shoot these oaks, you know. And Vermaak was screaming, Ketele, and he swung the turret towards his AA gun and took those gunners off their seat. And
one of the combat teams was surprised by a flank fire.
And they turned the anti-aircraft guns onto the rattles and they shot through 3 rattles.
And I lost a number of troops, which is another painful story.
We could actually hear the fight going on. We could hear all hell was breaking loose there, but we didn't know where exactly it was.
Then we took the wounded oaks to the medics.
And they put us into a medic rattle. And from there also, that rattle was getting hit, small on fire, remember that?
Bombs were falling, and it was, those anti-aircraft guns are terrible things. I don't know if you come into contact with one of them, but they were horrible bloody things.
And then a mortar landed on top of that rattle, I still remember, medic rattle. So at the time I actually laughed because I was so high on that morphine stuff that sassy gone, it's weird, you don't care anymore, you know, you become, there's fear and then there's another feeling that you, and then from there they took us to a Casovac place.
And the choppers came in and landed, and anti-aircraft guns were shooting at them. And then when the last chopper with Marco Kuiergat and I think a couple of other guys, Huxtable, a couple of other guys inside it, took off again, there was an anti-aircraft gun about 30 meters away from us. None of us saw it. And it fired at this chopper that was taking off. And to me, it looked like the rounds were going through the rotors. I thought, yes, who knows what you think at the time.
Casualty evacuation for us, Air Force-wise, was priority number 1. We dropped everything else for casualty evacuations. If we heard that one of our men was injured anywhere in the border area, we would set in motion a plan
Casinga, I participated in this for the main purpose of evaluating our systems, our weapon systems, the training policy that we had, and our tactical concept. Also to experience for myself what exactly is the risk of using South Africans in this kind of operation, because I had a responsibility not to have unnecessary casualties amongst South African troops. The Swapo bases again moved in closer to the border because it was not possible for them to operate inside South Africa and remain there. They had to operate from a temporary base short away the other side of the border, cross the border, do quickly some damage, and then come back again. And then Protea was the operation which we carried out, not as deep as the Casinga operation or the Skeptic operation, but we still cleared the area immediately north up to Pereira de Es and those places.
After the withdrawal of South African troops from Angola at the end of Operation Savannah in 1976, Pereira de Es and Fort Rocades became the FAPLA military strongholds of Wanjiva and Zangongo. These two garrison towns contained SWAPO elements, integrated with the Angolan army, and became the main objective of Operation Protea.
I think in military terms that was really a classic battle, something that could be studied. There was a task force that was assembled for this strike. It was called Task Force Alpha. It was under the command of Colonel Yup Bear. The force consisted of 4 combat groups. I was in command of Combat Group 10, which was 6-1 Mechanized Battalion Group. And the others were under command of Commandant Johan Dippenaar, Combat Group 20, Commandant Chris Serfontein, Combat Group 30, and Commandant Dion Ferreira, Combat Group 40.
The scale of Ops Protea was massive. This time the target was not only SWAPO. There was a probability that the Angolan army FAPLA would also put up a fight.
We realized that there's a need for additional forces and establish another force the same as 6-1. In other words, it's a identical composition as that of 6-1, and I was given the task in July 1981 to do that.
To assemble a battle group of this size, elements were hastily gathered from other units.
They made me an admin loot, which was really great for me. And after 6 months I said, hey man, I don't like this office job, I'd like to go to the border. So the next thing I knew, I was taking 22 Rodels up by road to Grootfontein and then on to 6-1 Battalion, and we had them refurbished, and then we did this ops which is called Ops Protea.
We were well trained then at 61 Mech Battalion because we'd spent months, 3-4 odd months doing all these exercises and being well oiled and everything.
I established the base in Oshevello, and I received all the soldiers, started with the training, and by mid-August the force was ready to do the attack on the bases at Zangongo and on Jiva.
The Air Force side of Protea was as a separate plan known as Operation Knife, and that called for the day before Protea started, we, the Air Force, would do attacks, autonomous Air Force attacks on the air defense systems that the Angolans had put up. In other words, their radar stations. We called for the Flummies, the fast jets, and the fast jets remained in South Africa all their time. Now the fast jets are what we used to know as the Flummies. These are the Vlamgatte, which is the Afrikaans word for the flame which comes out of the back of the jet pipe when an aeroplane's in afterburner, that big flame coming out this thing. It's the Vlamgatte. We got the Canberras, we got the Buccaneers, we got the Mirage F1 CZs from Waterkloof, we got the Mirage F1 AZs from Hoedspruit, and I was the commander of that one, and the Mirage 3s from 2 Squadron. They all came up to Ondangwa and Grootfontein. And they had a huge big radar station at a place called Chibemba, which covered our whole area, and that was our main sort of target. So the day before Protea started, that's what we did. The first day we went in with Canberras and Mirages. We attacked the place. Not a very successful attack, I must say that. We then went back in the afternoon to the same target, which is not a good thing to do in wartime. It's not a good idea to go back to a place where you've just disturbed the people. But we went back, and it was myself leading the strike against Chibemba, but I insisted that this time we'd go just with the Mirages. And we went in low level, so that the enemy never knew we were coming. So we did have a bit of surprise, and rushed in low level. We pitched up, I think there were 16 of us. Pitched up and then rode into the target, and we all bombed this radar site, and it was actually magnificent. It's a sight I will never forget. We came down, we dropped the bombs. As we pulled up, there was a layer of cloud which we had to go up through. And I can remember, as I pulled out like this, looking back over my shoulder as I popped out through the top of the cloud, and as I looked back, all I could see was one after the other, 16 Mirages just popping up through the cloud, one after. It was really a magnificent sight. It was beautiful.
We had to be self-independent with our own fuel, own rations, own ammunition, dependent for the duration of that operation, which was planned for 10 days. And that was a massive amount of vehicles that you had to get together before the operation to be independent. And in addition, the armored force, we tried to hide the armored force from any enemy observation on the way to Ruacana. And we took the Rattles and the combat vehicles on the northern part of the Etosha Pans. Then at Ruacana we had a forward logistical base where we did our final replenishment of vehicles, repairs, and then that night we went into Angola.
My combat group was responsible to cross the Kunene River at Ruacana. We did a left flanking attack and came in on the target from the northwestern direction to attack across Humbi, and then to approach Sangongo from the northwest.
And we as an Air Force then attacked all the anti-aircraft sites and artillery sites that we'd identified at Zangonga, and there were a lot of them. We had heavy strikes with Buccaneers, Canberras, Mirages, everybody. And even the Impalas were involved in that as well. So it was heavy strikes from. At one stage we had 100 and something fast jets at Ondongwa airfield. We were very vulnerable to attacks from enemy aircraft if they had to come back. But that's what we had to do. So we did our attack. We pulled off. The army then moved in. They went through the target. We'd taken out a lot of the enemy artillery and gun positions. But at one stage they got hampered, and they were caught by a 23mm gun sight.
The worst that you can get is a 23mm, the double barrel 23mm anti-aircraft gun, because that's what caused all the damage on the smoke show Rattles. And you can hear them, it goes, and then you know, yeah, but you can't see them. And you have to try and hide from something that you can't see, but it's a terrible feeling.
And they called for support, and we'd send jets back. We didn't do a tremendous job on that particular gun, and luckily in the vicinity was a Bosbok. A little Bosbok light aeroplane, and the pilot had smoke rockets used for marking targets, and he came in and took out that 23mm gun sight with his smoke rockets. He got the Norris Crooks.
20 was responsible to attack the airbase at Zangongo, which we did with great success.
Our fighting distance from where we started, we would end up at the Kunene River, was 800 meters, and it took us 7.5 hours to battle through the 800 meters. We had fierce resistance, in other words. We had a few tanks. They were dug in a southerly direction. They were physically reversed back into a sort of a installation where the turret only showed, and then they were sort of camouflaged. And we, having come from the east, we were slightly out of their turret swing, simply because they were hidden away too deeply. They had to in the two that we encountered there, had to physically drive out of their situation, drive out to be able to shoot towards us. And that made them easy targets, really.
And that was history made. The first tank that was shot out by a 90mm gun from a Rifle 90 was in Protea. And I was called in and I was told that the tank was shot out, and I hoped that it was still intact and not severely damaged. And that was in two ways history. It was also the first casualty of Protea happened there. We looked into the inside of this tank, and we saw that the tank, the gunner of the tank, was shot on the head with this 90mm, and there was nothing left. So it was quite a mess inside the tank. I got into the tank and looked around, and I decided that that's a medic job to clear all this. And I got out and we said, "Medic, would you clean everything inside? We want to remove the tank." The unbeknown to the medic, he didn't know what was going on inside, and he went inside the tank, and and when his eyes got used to the darkness, he saw what was going on, and he just couldn't take it. And he climbed out of the tank and stood on the turret and then passed out. And he fell from the turret onto the tracks, and he had quite a cut, I think 3 stitches on his head, and that was the first casualty for Protea.
My first responsibility was to attack from the west, and we cleared Humbi. There wasn't a great fight on the 24th of August, that was D-Day. And eventually we exploited very close to the river, and then I sent a few of my combat teams to clear the floodplains, and they had a pretty good fight there because some of the enemy were escaping across the river.
And that was also our first exposure to real action during Operation Protea, and also the first real incident where we came close to the reality of war, the fact that people could get killed.
And we moved and captured a large amount of equipment, and from there we moved to Onjiva. At Onjiva, the big challenge was the population, and I had the loudhailers to announce to the population not to get involved in fighting, but to move onto the streets where they can be seen so that they will not be fired on.
Whilst we were clearing the objective, General Jannie Geldnys arrived in a Puma helicopter, and we started talking to each other, and he said, "Roland, I want you to organize a soccer game against the soccer team of the town." And I thought he was somewhat balmy, but as all good mechanized commanders do, I said yes, sir, to General Jannie Geldnys. And we turned out there with our 6-1 Mech t-shirts, and the town was there with all the people watching in the stadium, and the soccer team in their official Sangongo jerseys, and we had a hell of a great game, and they beat us 3-1. But that was now really good for turning the hearts and the minds of the people, and we became great friends with them. After that, my technical people helped them fix the generators and the water systems and a lot of little tasks that soldiers normally don't do.
When the security forces withdrew from Protea, they wanted the Sangongo bridge blown up.
There were very, very, very precise instructions with regards to the blowing of the bridge. And the only person who could really give us permission to blow that bridge was the commander of the Southwest Africa Territorial Force, Major General Charles Lloyd.
It was one of the major arteries for the logistical support of the war at that stage. So taking that bridge off would put severe challenges to the enemy's logistical systems.